So I thought I would do a video on some of the most common, or I guess reoccurring questions that I get as an interior designer, and hopefully it will help you to sort of implement things and give you strategies if you're starting to design, or if you're already in the process, or even just making the decision-making process a little bit easier, and give you a bit of guidance on maybe some things that you can do. These are things that I implement myself, and maybe it's not for everyone, but it works for me, and I find it really gets the creative juices flowing. And I thought I would share them because, as I said, I get asked these questions a lot, and it's obviously something that a lot of people, I guess, struggle with or want help with. Yeah, so let's get into the video. So probably the most common question that I get asked is, what is the first step, or what do I do when I'm thinking of starting designing a space or renovating a space? I know this is a bit cliche and it's what a lot of people say, but there's, I guess, a reason as to why people suggest this, and that is to use a mood board. Having a mood board really helps you to visualize your aesthetic and have, I guess, a sense of your overall direction and the path that you're going to go on with your design. Personally, I use Pinterest to create my mood boards just because it's a really easy way at home, or I've got Pinterest on my phone, and create separate boards for different rooms, or one board for an overall vision. If Pinterest is not really for you, you can also use a physical mood board if you're into more sort of tactile, I guess, visualization. So you can get yourself a cork board, you can buy a few magazines or any clippings that you have, paint samples, fabric swatches, whatever it is that inspires you. Start putting those things together on your mood board to see what comes of it. So the first mood board that I would create is kind of just a photo dump, or a brainstorm of everything that you're drawn to. It may be an image, and there may be one aspect of the image that you like, or the overall aesthetic, or a color. This step really helps you to visualize what you're naturally drawn to. You can start to pick up sort of patterns in the images and things that you're collecting. I do find that when I go through this process, there is often different aesthetics or different interior design styles that I start putting together, which may not necessarily work for a singular space. You kind of want to narrow it down and pick one general aesthetic. So the next step, once you have these images and everything together, is to start culling. So by that, I mean, start looking at the images that you have and cutting out the ones that you know aren't really maybe 100% truly what you love. Maybe you've selected it because you've seen it somewhere, it's a trend, or you don't really know why you selected it. Those are the types of images and things that I would start to remove from your board. As you're culling, try and think of how you can sort of frame it in a way that the images have maybe similarities through them. So whether that's colors, furniture, materials, anything that sort of has a common thread, that's going to start to really pull these pieces and ideas together and direct you in, I guess, what your outcome's going to be. So once you kind of have your finalized overall board, then you can kind of start to look at the colors that you've got in there, maybe some certain prints and patterns, and you can start to order fabrics, paint samples, and see how these things come together in real life. It's very easy to have, I guess, digital pictures on Pinterest, but when you start to really get physical samples, you'll get a much clearer idea of how things are going to actually work in your space. So that's my first tip, is to create a mood board when you're starting out your project, when you're coming up with new ideas. It's just a really helpful way, I find, to collate your ideas and kind of get the whole creative process started. The next question that I get asked a lot is, how can I choose a color scheme or a theme for the room that I'm designing? I know that picking a color scheme or a theme for your room can be really overwhelming, because there is honestly endless resources and endless things to choose from, that it feels like no matter what you choose, maybe you're going to go with the wrong thing. But I just want to say there's no right or wrong, and you have to trust your gut, and remember that not everything is permanent. Anything you do in your space is essentially temporary. So if you hate it, you can change it. To make it easier, there are certain, I guess, confinements and limitations to what we can do, which I find actually makes the process a lot easier, a little bit more streamlined, and takes the stress out of the overwhelming choice that we have with everything that's available to us. It makes you become more resourceful and think about things in a different way when you know that you have limitations put on the design. Often, on projects that I'm working on, there's always limitations. So it might be an existing building, brief that they're after will really help to sort of refine and I guess, narrow down what it is that we need to do as designers. And the same applies for you, whether that's in one small room of your house, your whole house, whatever it is that you're designing. So just remember that there's always going to be things that are going to help to collate that brief. So in saying that, the first thing that I would do is look at the space that you're wanting to design or change in some way. Come up with your own brief that's going to allow you to narrow down what you can do in the space. So think about maybe the scale of the room, and if it's a small room, how is that going to create a brief? Or if it's a large room, what are some of the things that you need to consider as well? For example, maybe it requires larger furniture, maybe it requires a certain type of window furnishing. Start to think about the things that are going to be applicable to that space and a help in creating your brief. Next, think about the purpose of the room. So if it's a sitting room, how do you want the space to feel? Do you want it to feel sort of cocooned and small and warm and cozy? Or do you want it to feel really like open and bright and sort of airy? Because its function is the same, it's more about how you want to feel in that space or how you want that space to operate. Lastly, you can think about something like lighting, which is obviously such an important part of any interior design project. If the space is really dark, naturally, what does that mean for artificial lighting? How can you implement lighting in a way that's going to give it the overall effect that you want? Or if it gets a lot of light and you want to be able to control that a little bit more, what sort of window furnishings can you put in? Maybe you can put in slightly darker furniture. It's really just thinking about it from, I guess, a functional and logical perspective to start with, which really helps in creating the brief. I would recommend that when you're choosing your colors for the space, I wouldn't pick any more than 3. So maybe you pick one primary color that's sort of the bigger, bolder color in the space. Your second color is the secondary color, which might be joinery or I guess larger furniture pieces. And then a third color, which is maybe accents or smaller features in the space. I think going any more than 3 colors can be overwhelming, and you're probably likely going to get a bit stressed out by that, and it might just be a bit clashy. So I would start with 3 colors to sort of get you going. Another thing you can do when choosing colors is to also think of the furniture that you currently have, and if you're going to be reusing it, think of the colors of your furniture and the tones, the type of wood, if you have wood furniture, or the fabrics, and try to pick colors that you think are going to complement those pieces. So again, you can order paint samples and put them up against your furniture and see if it works. And if it does, that's great. If it doesn't, then back to the drawing board. Again, my last tip with the paint samples is, once you've found the colors that you're wanting to use, is to pin them on the wall in the room and just leave them there for a week or so and see how the colors work in the space. If you still like them after a week, you have to remember that colors will change throughout the day as the light moves through the space. So in the morning, you might get a lighter version of a color as the sun comes in, depending on your orientation. And then in the evening, that will darken. So see how you like the color throughout the day, and do this over a week period, a week or 2 weeks, before you commit to picking the color for the space. The next question that I get asked a lot is, how can I pick furniture that I know I'm going to love in 10 years from now, or pick furniture that I'm not going to get sick of? And that's a really fair question. It's not easy picking furniture because it feels like a really big investment, and it feels like you have to, I guess, be stuck with it for a period of time. But I want to offer advice in terms of things that you can do to maybe make that feel a little bit less scary and know that you're making the right decision when purchasing furniture. So again, I would suggest creating a Pinterest board and start picking out pieces of furniture or images of furniture that you're drawn to. This is going to be really helpful in determining the style of furniture that you're into. So whether that's mid-century, if it's more traditional or antique, vintage, modern, contemporary, whatever it is, there's so many different types of furniture. And again, I know that can be overwhelming. So trying to narrow down the style of furniture that you like can always be really helpful. In saying this, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself and say, this is the only type of furniture that I can purchase, because I think it can be really nice to mix different types of furniture, but it's just a really good starting point if you're feeling overwhelmed about what pieces you want to purchase and invest in. Now that you kind of have an idea of the pieces that you're interested in, I would always suggest going to a showroom or vintage stores or thrift stores, deceased estate sales, and looking at furniture that you're interested in and sitting in a chair, using a table, seeing the material in real life, because again, it's so easy to sort of get caught up in looking at everything online, but until you start seeing things IRL, it's going to make a big difference and really start to, again, narrow down what it is that you actually like, which basically means make sure it's functional before you buy it, other than just purchasing it because it looks good. Another thing to remember is that furniture doesn't always have to be super expensive. There are so many options available to you that are going to, I guess, take the stress out of buying furniture. I think it can be so fun to buy vintage furniture that's affordable. You know, Facebook Marketplace is a great place to start if you're looking to sort of upgrade your pieces. Again, if you have pieces that maybe just need a little bit of TLC, a little bit of restoration, that's always a much more affordable way to, I guess, reinvigorate your space with existing furniture. If you have a couch that you really love, but you're sick of the fabric or you want to upgrade it, maybe you could think about purchasing a fabric and having it reupholstered. And again, that's just going to give it a new lease on life, so to speak, and without having to buy a whole new sofa. Lastly, what I'm going to say is take your time when buying furniture. It's so easy to want to just go out and have your space done and ready and, you know, move in and have it all set up. But I find that that's often when clients end up regretting a lot of their purchases. It's really important to, just like with the color choices, to take your time to look at the furniture pieces more than once and to make sure that you really love them. Another helpful thing you can do is take photos or printouts of furniture and pin them up in the room that you're wanting to put them in, and look at them every day to make sure that you know that you really like them. And that's just like a really helpful thing that you can do before making that transaction. Another question that I get asked is, how can I save money or design a space when I'm on a budget? And I understand that hiring an interior designer is a luxury and it's not something that everyone can afford, but there are so many things that you can do to help cut costs or save money without the space feeling cheap or feeling like a bit sort of hodgepodge and sort of not put together very well. So there are so many things you can do to teach yourself skills these days, and people find it daunting because it looks really complicated, but there are so many YouTube tutorials on things that you can learn, that you can implement yourself, even if it's just really basic things or tips that are going to make your skill set better. So maybe you can watch YouTube videos on things you can do to make your painting look better, or oiling floorboards, or sanding, anything you can do yourself that is still going to have a really great outcome. I would suggest doing that as opposed to trying to hire trades to do everything for you. Even things like creating your own cushion covers, learning to sew is something that's really easy and I think a very useful tool to have when it comes to redoing your interiors, because it's such a universal thing that is going to allow you to save money. You know, it's very easy to make your own curtains, cushion covers, blankets, whatever it is. I would highly recommend learning to sew if you have a sewing machine. If not, I totally understand that you maybe don't want to invest in that, but that is one way I find really helpful in saving money. My next tip is to purchase items from stores that are maybe on the more affordable side. So for example, IKEA, you can purchase things like tables. You can check out a video in my feed that I did of a DIY table from IKEA that I customized, and you can get bookshelves and install those and then paint them in a color of your choice, or get a joiner to spray them in polyurethane, which again is so much cheaper than having custom joinery installed, and no one's going to know the difference. It's just going to look like a custom piece of joinery that you've paid a lot of money for, but in actual fact it's IKEA. If you get these pieces from IKEA or any other store, you can again upgrade the hardware on them to something custom. You can purchase some knobs off Etsy or some handles from wherever. That's going to be 1/10 of the cost of having a custom piece installed in your space. Again, I always come back to this, but it's buying vintage furniture. It's buying pieces that are pre-loved and things that you can restore or give a bit of TLC to, that are going to uniqueness into your space and won't break the bank. Similarly to what I said before, you can reupholster any existing furniture you have, you can change the hardware, try and get creative with the things that you have and think about the things that you can do that are going to help you save money. So if you're looking at the space, write down a list of all the things that need to be done and see what you can teach yourself, what you need to hire trades for, or how you can save money in some way. And The last question that I get asked a lot is, how can I add personality and character to a space without it feeling like cookie cutter or like I've just copied it out of a magazine? And a lot of the homes I go into are very much cookie cutter. They're all that sort of same, I guess, minimal vibe and neutral, and there's always some sort of common thread that is running through these houses, and I think it's really boring. And it's way more interesting to walk into a space that reflects the person that's living there, their lifestyle, their family, their friends. I think that is way more interesting to me than an over-styled interior design. Sorry, I also hate air quotes. I don't know why I keep doing that. So some of the things you can do to add personality are, again, like I said previously, is to add sentimental objects into your home or things that relate to you and your life. I think it's easy to go out and buy everything and sort of stage a home, but if you start implementing things that maybe are a reflection of your life, if it's a photo that you really love or an artwork that someone gave to you or something that you collected on your travels, try and have those things on display, because they're not only relevant to you, they're also going to tell a story when someone comes into your home. It's a conversation starter, and it's something that is going to allow you to start weaving your story into the space that you spend, I guess, most of your time in. To add personality to a space, I would also think about statement pieces. So maybe you have one large piece of furniture or an item that is, I guess, the focal point of the space that's going to draw interest and intrigue into that area. So maybe it's a really loud couch or a really amazing light fitting, something that's sort of going to inject a bit of personality as opposed to just standard, for example, standard light fittings or just your everyday sofa. I think that's sort of going to go beyond the norm is always going to add personality to a space. Another thing that's going to inject personality into your space is, again, vintage pieces that have a story behind them or have already lived their life, and you're going to add it into your space and give them a new life. That's always going to add more personality as opposed to buying sort of cookie cutter pieces that you find from places like West Elm and Pottery Barn. It's always far more interesting to have pieces that are one-off or that maybe are no longer produced, or if they're custom pieces, as opposed to flat pack or, you know, mass-produced furniture. So those are just some things you can do to add character to a space, personality. And I think just remember that your home is constantly evolving as your life is changing, as you are changing, as your style changes. I don't think anything is permanent. Everything is transient, and just remember that you want your space to be changing as you change, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not set in stone. My style changes all the time. I'm constantly redoing my apartment because I get sick of it, or I see something that really inspires me to, I guess, redesign it. And it's so fun. You should be having fun with the space. You don't have to rely on just making one decision and being stuck with it. You can always change your mind and swap things out. So I hope that's been helpful. As I said, they are just some really common interior design questions I get, and I thought I'd share them on here because maybe they're questions that you have as well, and I hope that it's helped in some way. Just remember that interior design is supposed to be fun, and it's something, as I said previously, that is always changing. And lastly, just trust yourself. If you trust yourself, you can't go wrong. If you just keep telling yourself that you're making the right decision, that you know what you like, you're always going to end up with a really great outcome. So until my next video, I hope you're all doing well. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you then. Bye.